All right, hi. So yeah, basically I want to talk about music, this deep and complex art form of shaping sounds within time. And you know, music has a lot of aspects, right? I mean, it's very abstract. It allows us to communicate beneath and beyond cultures. It's fun, it's moving and touching. And you know, music feels like a very human thing, right? And that's not really surprising, especially when you think about the fact that the very first sound that each of us hears, even before we are born, is the heartbeats of our mothers. So our bodies are designed to understand rhythm and to hear rhythm. The soothing, rhythmic pulse of the heartbeat is the first thing that we hear. And frankly speaking, our bodies are designed to work in rhythm and understand rhythm. And many of the activities that we do every day are focused in some sort of rhythm, like walking, or speaking, or talking. In musical terms, we can say that most of the activities we do kind of fall somewhere in between 100 and 120 BPM, which is beats per minute, which is a musical way of measuring the tempo. You could also say that that's somewhere between moderato and allegro, or allegretto maybe. And music is very human, and it has always played an important function. And it has played many functions, like ritual functions, or like social functions, or like bonding functions. And there's a very short way from the mother's heartbeat to one of the first instruments that were ever used. And the first instruments that were used were percussion instruments, like drums. Drums have this very nice property of being very loud. So actually, like huge tribal drums were the first means of long-range communication that humans ever used. So tribes, you know, when we were all much more tribal than today, tribes had huge drums, and like this rhythm meant war, this rhythm meant peace, this rhythm meant hunger, etc., etc. So you can convey abstract ideas over long distances. But come a couple of centuries later, and it turns out that our social functions and our social needs have grown significantly. We not only want to communicate, you know, like these simple ideas, but we also want to communicate something deeper, like emotion, right? So again, technology has much improved since tribal drums, and it turns out that we became pretty good in manipulating different materials, like wood, or like metal, or like stone. But let's focus on wood. Wooden instruments like have this really nice kind of compelling property up till today, right? I mean, when we look at a violin or other wooden instrument, it kind of feels, you know, like precious and majestic and like organic, right? And this applies to wooden instruments such as pianos or such as violins, or wooden instruments such as the saxophone. And yeah, the saxophone is actually considered a wooden instrument, and that's because the mouthpiece, the reed over here, it has this wooden piece, hence it is a woodwind. And we kind of became really good with expressing ideas with these tools, right? But then comes the 20th century, and something changes in our tooling. And this guy comes. And to an extent, there is a familiar part, right? The keyboard is the familiar part. But apart from that, you've got all these knobs and dials and cables, etc. This is a synthesizer. And this is a synthesizer as well. I mean, this guy looks like the control panel, you know, in like a nuclear power plant. And believe me, playing this thing gives you the same feeling of being in charge as the control panel of the power plant. But still, the keyboard is the common part. But this is also a synthesizer, and this guy has no keyboard, right? So the heart of the instrument is somewhere else. And it's been a long time since electronic instruments like this were tools used only for experimental electronic music or certain genres, you know, like techno or house music, etc. Imagine this. Imagine you're in a movie theater and you went to see a science fiction movie. And there's this grand opening scene, there's this desert planet in some universe, and there's like this triple sunrise happening and comets are flying, etc., etc. And there's a huge chance that what you're hearing in the score to that film, in that particular scene, that's just a couple of tracks from a device like this. Synthesizers are able to produce these absolutely awe-inspiring, majestic sounds that were never before possible. So what does the heart of a synthesizer look like? Well, it's something like this. This is the circuit diagram for an oscillator. And this is what an oscillator looks like in practice. And this is what an oscillator does. It produces waves, and all of those knobs and dials and cables that you've seen, those are just tools that kind of allow you to manipulate those waves in creative ways. And if you plug a synthesizer into this device, and this device is called an oscilloscope, if you plug a synthesizer into an oscilloscope, you can see the waves that you are creating. Or you can just plug it into a speaker and listen to those amazing sounds, right? So there's been a way from the wooden instruments to these electronic instruments, right? So the way and the heart of the instrument has changed, but the main idea has stayed the same. When we create new tools, new ideas become available. And many of the musicians who use synthesizers in their everyday creative work, they don't really know much about electronics or about, you know, how electricity works, etc., etc., but they have the same feeling about their instrument as the violin player does. They know precisely how their instrument will react to each of the dials and knobs and oscillators and LFOs and envelopes, etc., etc., as the violin player would know how the violin would react to the bow of the violin, right? So the tools have changed, and our sonic possibilities and our possibilities of expression have expanded drastically with the expansion of technology and with the new ideas. But the main idea, that the underlying idea and the underlying means of expression have stayed the same. And this brings us to what's happening in technology right now in modern times, because right now we seem to be very interested in modeling our own intelligence. And this brings us to neural networks. So this is what a neural network looks like. It's exactly, literally like this. No, it isn't. But there's some inputs on the left side, there's some outputs on the right side, and in the middle there's some complicated computations. And I like to think about neural networks in this way. So you can see that the inside is kind of a map. And you can see trees and lakes, and you can see roads, and I think that's all you can see over here. But that's not really a lake, right? That's a bunch of blue pixels bunched together. I mean, and that's like a bunch of green pixels, but we kind of know it resembles a tree, right? So these are representations. And now think about yourself as a photographer. You take a map, just like this. You take a map, you select a point on that map, you drive there, you take out your camera, and your idea is to take the most beautiful picture of your surroundings as possible. You can take the picture at this angle, or that angle, or any other angle. You can modify the light. You can switch some other parameters on your camera, right? You've got an infinite sea of possibilities that you can take from that singular point on the map. And this is kind of what neural networks do. They compress ideas and they compress data into representations that can be put on sort of a map. And this map, in scientific terms, we call that map a latent space, or a representation space, or a hidden space, but I like the word latent space. And it's incredible how modern neural network technology works with these latent spaces. I mean, I know that neural networks are associated mostly with language models or with prompt-based models. You type something in, and the network outputs something else. But neural networks can process different forms of data in different ways. And let me give you just two examples. There's this neural network called RAVE, which stands for Real-Time Audio Variational Autoencoder. I know, that's a mouthful. And you can plug that neural network into a motion sensor. And then directly by waving the motion sensor in 3D realistic space, you are actually moving around the latent space of that neural network. And if you train RAVE, for instance, on drums, you can find particular movements that correspond to particular sounds. Like you can find that this is a snare drum, this is a bass drum. And you can create new sorts of expressions and new performances that were never before possible with conventional instruments. And the second example that I've been fortunate to hear in person is something that's called a hitar, as in hit and guitar. And it's a guitar with a bunch of fancy devices plugged in. So the signal from the guitar is processed in real time by a neural network that morphs the sound of the guitar into something else. And the performance I've heard was with the hitar morphing sounds of the guitar into tabla, which is an Indian percussive instrument. So the guy was playing a guitar, but what we were hearing was a mix of guitar and tabla being reinterpreted and molded by a neural network wandering around its latent space. So I think that you already know what's the answer to the question that we've started with. Why does music evolve with us? Well, from our bodily functions to the tools that we build, up to the ways that we try to model our own intelligence and how we perceive the world. From heartbeats to latent spaces. Music evolves with us because music is us. And it's been a pleasure to talk to you about music today. Thank you.